Hey everybody, how's it going today? Danielle Hargenrader here, founder of Diabetes Dominator. Really excited to bring you Riva Greenberg on this edition of Unleash Your Inner Diabetes Dominator. I'm going to give you a quick bio about Riva and then we're really going to get to the nitty gritty. So Riva Greenberg has lived with type 1 diabetes for 43 years. She is a certified health coach, columnist on the Huffington Post, international inspirational speaker, and author of 3 books, Diabetes Do's and How-To's, 50 Diabetes Myths That Can Ruin Your Life, and the ABCs of Loving Yourself with Diabetes. Riva also conducts flourishing workshops for people with diabetes and healthcare professionals. That's awesome. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Riva.
It's a pleasure to be here, Danielle. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, no, absolutely. So first thing that comes to mind is I see that you've been diabetic for 43 years. And so one of the things that I always talk about, being 24 years is how different things were back then, even 24 years ago. So maybe you could give us a little background on how things were when you first got diagnosed and maybe a little bit about your path from where you were to where you are today.
Absolutely. Well, I should say, just for clarification, that it'll be my 43rd anniversary with diabetes, I think, in 2 weeks, February 1st. Well, it's a very weird thing. Am I looking forward to that? I don't know, but I can say at least we're still here, right?
I was going to say it is an accomplishment. Maybe it's the best, anniversary to celebrate, but at the same time, it's nice to celebrate the fact that you're here and you're thriving and you're healthy. I mean, that's fantastic. I think you should celebrate that.
So I was, and I can look at a lot of my history and where I am now as fortunate. Because of that history, because I've seen the changes that have occurred over the last 4 decades, and I've seen how far we've come. So I got type 1 when I was 18. In 1972, I just recently discovered that disposable syringes had only come out for wide use a few years before that. So if I had gotten it just a couple of years earlier, I would have been amongst those who were sharpening and boiling those dreadful needles, which I've seen, and they are frightening.
Yes.
So there alone, I feel very, very blessed. I've been having the typical symptoms. It was my freshman year of college. I was away at school, came home on a winter break, and one of my symptoms that you don't hear about that often was these vicious leg cramps that occurred in the middle of the night. So I got it at my parents' house. My mother heard me screaming, came running into the room, said, "We're going to the doctor," and took a simple blood test in his office, and I was 750, so right to the hospital for 4 days and learn how to inject insulin, right?
Right. I've been there.
And then for the next 10 years, there were no meters.
Wow.
So I would go to a lab twice a year to get my blood sugar.
Wow. See, that I've never even heard of.
Very useful information twice a year, right?
Yes.
Now we check, 7, 8 times a day type of thing?
Sure.
And I remember when they gave me a diabetic diet, they said, don't eat candy bars. But nobody said pasta, rice, cakes, scones, muffins.
Right.
Your blood sugar just as much. So the first 10 years, I was really sort of like just floating out there. And then as meters came out, of course, then you could check your blood sugar, and that was probably the single biggest change for me. And then you could take responsibility. Yeah. And as more information came out, we learned more. I became better about what I ate and getting exercise. So for as long as I can remember, I walk an hour a day, and I know that's about 7,200 steps, and then I get the rest just looking for things in my apartment.
Let me ask you this now. Were you always inclined to be physically active, or was that something you decided to do because you knew it would have a positive effect on your blood sugar?
It had to do with the subway strike in New York City.
Oh, okay.
When we all had to start walking to work.
Okay.
When I really had to start walking, walking 45 minutes to get to work instead of taking the subway, I realized that I could do this. It wasn't so hard, and I kind of liked it.
Right.
So I decided that was going to be my exercise of choice, and I have done it everywhere. I lived in Tokyo for a year. I lived in Sydney, Australia for a year. I've traveled widely, and everywhere I go, I walk, and I love it.
That's great.
It's a great way, to see things while you're traveling.
Absolutely.
And, right? It just helps with your blood sugar wherever you are.
Sure, and you get to connect with nature. I mean, what could be better?
Well, there's not a lot of nature around here.
No, not Brooklyn.
I'm in Brooklyn, although I do have a really beautiful park not far from me, and I walk around the park most mornings.
Good.
So anyway, so little by little in my 30s and 40s, I was picking up ways to do better. And you asked, was there an aha or a click or a moment? And I have said this often. When I was 48, 3 things happened that really changed everything. One, I lost my job through no fault of my own. But I was working for a .com, and they went bankrupt, and everybody was out of work. I was having frozen shoulder surgery that year, which can be a complication of diabetes. Mm-hmm. And I was getting married that year for the first time. And when my husband's heard me say that, he says, "Are you planning a second time?" I say, "No, but when people hear you got married at 48, they kind of automatically assume it must be a second time." But it was a first, and I realized fully that my health was as important to somebody else as it was to me. So I went to a diabetes educator for the very first time. At that point, I'd had diabetes for 32 years, and I went to a CDE for the very first time. And, sort of all of that, getting married, going to a diabetes educator, losing my job, being 48, wondering what I wanted to do with my life, I decided that I was going to start working in diabetes. And so one of the first things I did was I started going to conferences, diabetes conferences. And at one of them, I heard Bill Polanski talk. A lot of people know who Bill is. He's a diabetes educator and a psychologist. And I was at a TCOYD one-day educational event, and I was in his workshop, and he said to everybody in his workshop, there must have been 100 of us, right? All people with diabetes. He said, "How many of you think diabetes is the leading cause of blindness, amputation, heart attack? Raise your hand." Look, everybody raised their hand, including me. And he said, "You're wrong." Like, what? He said, "Poorly controlled diabetes." Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Yes, absolutely. I actually don't know of this man, but I can't wait to go research him. So yes. Fantastic, because I say that all the time. I hear all these statistics and the kind of doom and gloom they have around, this many people die of this. It's the complications of uncontrolled diabetes that cause these. It's not the actual diabetes itself. It's if you're not taking care of it the way it needs to be taken care of. So that's a fantastic aha moment.
It was, and I literally felt like relief in my shoulders, and I thought, I've probably been carrying the idea that I'm going to get complications for my whole diabetes life. I've been carrying it. And it just sort of like slid off my shoulders. And it also gave me the idea that what I did mattered, that I could influence my health. And so at that point, I would say, while I'd been committed to my health, I got super committed.
Right.
So so that really was the moment I consider changed things.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and I'm really glad you shared that, because that is one of the biggest, as far as where I come from, is I'm a personal trainer and I'm into physical fitness, and I'm a nutritionist and I'm big into food, but I really think that more than anything else of taking care of your own diabetes is the psychology behind it. And if you believe that you are going to get complications, you are going to be much less likely to do the things with the physical fitness and the nutrition that would stop the complications from happening, because you feel, like you said, you had been carrying around that weight on your shoulders, that you knew you were going to get these complications. So, you know, a lot of people will have the mentality of, well, why should I even put forth this effort? Because of course it is effort, but it's totally worth it, because you can influence your diabetes. You can not have complications, and it is up to you, but you have to believe it first in your mind for that to take place and start transferring over into the actions as far as the eating and the movement and everything else. So that's wonderful that you even mentioned that.
I absolutely believe the same. In fact, I've been doing this work in diabetes for about a dozen years, and what I'm really concentrating now on is what I call flourishing with diabetes. And I really believe that we can have a great life with diabetes. And in fact, not despite the fact that we have diabetes, but because of it. I honest to God think I would never be this healthy. I would never take this good care of myself. I would never walk an hour a day or really eat healthfully if not for the fact that I have diabetes.
And I couldn't agree with you more. From my story is exactly the same. I guarantee you right now I wouldn't be standing in front of you as considering myself an athlete, from coming from weighing 200 pounds and being, you know, having a binge eating problem, where if I did not become acutely aware of the fact that what caused me to change from being 200 pounds was that I knew that I was in I really was slowly contributing to the death of myself, to the death of my internal organs, to all of that stuff. And when, you know, you realize that you can have that change, but I also realized that, you know, in my side of the family, my father's side of the family, just about everyone is obese. And my mother's side of the family, my mother's my rock. She's not overweight, but everybody else in her family is passed away. And I'm talking parents, siblings, cousins, from a lot of weight-related diseases. And if I did not have this diabetes, I would not have any idea about how important it was to be healthy. Or maybe I would know that it was important, but I wouldn't have that drive to make it such a central part of my being. So that's a great kind of point for people to think of, is that, you know, I love, and when I was reading it on your website, it's like, I'm not living this life, in spite of diabetes. I'm living this life because of diabetes. So it's a very empowering feeling to know that you can control that. And in my opinion, one of the very few things that we as human beings in this world can actually control is our health. Really can't control too much else, because there's outside influences, but no one's shoving food down our throats. No one's locking us in a chair and saying don't move, don't physically exercise. It's completely up to us. So that's an amazing distinction to make.
Yeah, I see it as an opportunity. It's an opportunity for growth. It's an opportunity to get healthier. And when I started this work, I started by interviewing people who have diabetes, and I've done over 175 interviews, I'm sure. And this idea of flourishing, one of the things that came in part from these interviews, because I noticed that many, many people I talked to were not down and out. They were actually doing great and had not just got on top of their health, but also found more purpose in their lives, whether they were teaching others about diabetes or going after a dream that they had given up on. It was really remarkable what a catalyst getting diabetes was for a lot of people. And, I don't want to give people the impression that if you're first diagnosed, there's no grief or sadness, or, there's no shock. Yes, you're going to go through all that. But then there is opportunity to make life even bigger, better, more purposeful, more healthy, more happy than it was before. And I asked people, has diabetes made you less happy, more happy, nothing? And a lot of people said more happy, because, again, they had used it to fulfill something. So, as you said, as we know, it's not really what happens to you, it's how you look at what happens to you.
Absolutely. It's all about perspective, and I agree with what you said about, when you do first get diagnosed, just like you losing anything, you will have to go through a grieving period, and you'll have to go through the steps. You know, I kind of almost think of it as mourning the death of your pancreas in a way, because your pancreas is still producing glucagon and other hormones and things like that, but it's not doing for you what it is supposed to be doing for you, and it is a sense of loss. And I think there is a very heavy emotional side to diabetes that unfortunately even endocrinologists and doctors nowadays, now if they have diabetes themselves, that's one thing, but if they don't, they can't directly relate to it, so they don't necessarily address it as much as they address the physical needs to take care of it, which are obviously important. But a lot of people, especially when you're younger, I was 9 years old, you know, and moving into puberty and things like that, and kids that are already in, you know, they're tweens and teens, they're going through so much else, so you do have to kind of let them know, or we should let you know, that you will have to go through a period of mourning and loss. But that period should last, you know, however long your mourning period takes, but then that opportunity to move forward, just like any, you know, trauma or tragedy that you would experience, you could, like, kind of like a phoenix rising from the ashes, you can always just come out bigger and stronger from it, but you have to think about it in that way. For me, it's given me passion and purpose in life. You know, I always wanted to work with people, you know, and when I came out and went into personal training school, which was 500 hours in a gym learning all anatomy and physiology, if you would have asked me, you know, 10 years before that, if I would have been training people how to be physically fit, I would have laughed in your face. I would have said, squat? What's that? Like, I don't even know what that is. But because of the diabetes, it gave me this power, this strength, this purpose, this passion. I said, if I can lose this weight, if I can take my A1C from 13.5 to 6, then how could I not share that story with other people and possibly help them get where they're going? It's just it's an empowering feeling if you so choose to use it as such. So yes, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love hearing it from other people. So even me, like, you know, I've been coaching for 5 years, but just hearing it from you, you know, it's just, it like lights up my heart. It really does, because it just makes me genuinely happy to see you out there flourishing and teaching other people to do the same.
Yeah, as a psychology person, you know, we're all familiar with the expression post-traumatic stress, right? If there's some trauma, post-traumatic. But there's also a condition that we rarely hear about, which is post-traumatic growth.
Mm-hmm.
There are traumas, perhaps all could, if we look at it that way. How could we grow from this?
Yeah, and I think there's I'm a big follower of personal development. You know, I follow Tony Robbins, and there's Brendan Burchard and people like that. But one of the things that I've learned is about the language that we use when we talk to ourselves about diabetes, or we talk to other people. It's like you can ask yourself questions like, why is this happening to me? Why am I always having such bad luck? Or, oh, why can't I catch a break? Or, you know, and then that might happen when your blood sugar is 300. You might ask yourself that kind of question. And unfortunately, psychologically speaking, that kind of question, no matter what you ask your brain, it's going to produce an answer for you. That's what your brain does. So if you change the question to, well, what caused that? What do I think may have caused that? Or what action could I take next time to kind of see that that doesn't happen? Or you just ask questions that could produce actionable answers that could give you some type of improvement in the future, versus always going, because for me, I lived in the world of pity. I lived in a pity party for myself for 10 years out of my 24 years. I mean, why me? I'm defective. What did I do? You know, what did I do in a past lifetime to deserve this? You know, all these questions that were just fueling my depression. And once you change those questions about why this is happening to you, the answer change.
How did you get out of your depression?
I mean, for me, it was just, my father passed away the day after my 12th birthday, and I had been diabetic for just about 4 years at that point. But it was just, I guess, the combination of those two things happening led me into this horrible depression where, you know, my mom, she was working, but she wasn't the major breadwinner, and now she had to be the breadwinner for her child. You know, she had to make sure she had insurance, because otherwise there would have been a lot of problems. And I turned to food as my comfort. Food was the thing that I said, oh, well, I'm not supposed to have this. So, I went and I ate lots of processed carbs. And what I did was I would do it in private. My mom would be at work until 6 or 7 o'clock, but I'd get home from school at 3. So I'd eat the whole time she was at work. And then, after she went to bed, I'd stay up and binge eat at like 2 in the morning. I mean, it was really bad. But what happened was, as I was growing up, as I got to be 18, 19, out of high school, into college, realizing that I felt, for me, it was an incongruency. Really, that was kind of like my aha moment. I'd look in the mirror, and I always had friends, and I always had good jobs, and things went well because I had a strong work ethic, but I felt that the person that I was physically showing to the outside world did not match the person that I felt that I was on the inside, and I just decided to change. I mean, really, I had studied nutrition from all the time that I'd been diabetic. I had tons of books. I read them. I knew what I was supposed to be doing. I just wasn't actually doing it. So I just started slowly doing it. It's not like I lost 65 pounds in like 1 year. I mean, this took me like 6, 7 years, and I'm still on the path to improvement. And I think that's the whole thing, is that I realized that I wasn't going to ever just get where I wanted to be, that I was always going to be on a path of improvement no matter what point in my life that I was in. And instead of seeing it as something that needed to have an end date, that it would just be something that would always be part of my life. And that's kind of how, I tried different diets and different exercise routines, and then eventually I just found what worked for me and just kept with it consistently. And that was really what happened for me. And then I went to personal training school, and then I started coaching other people, and that just, kind of the fulfillment that I got from that was so overwhelming that I just knew that I would never do anything else with my life after that. But it was a gradual process. It's not, it's not like you see these shows on TV like, oh, well, it's extreme weight loss and you did this and this and this and it just happened in a year. It didn't. And I'm not saying that's not possible, but that's the kind of mentality that you have to have, where it's an ongoing journey that we get to be on. It's not a journey that we have to be on. It's a journey that we get to be on. That's kind of, it's just that little, and then my switch to, my aha moment was actually at a Tony Robbins seminar, which might sound a little, foo-foo or, things like that. But
walk over hot coals?
I did walk over hot coals, actually. But it was one word, because I spent so much of my life thinking that diabetes happened to me, but diabetes actually happened for me. And it was switching 2 to 4 that made this click. I was like, and then, that was when I went into coaching, and that was just, it was very powerful to think, like you say, that it's not a curse if you don't see it as such. But I saw it as one for so long that you really do have to take that action and kind of consistently bolster that, feeling of, this is not going to be the end of me. Actually, this is going to give me the opportunity to be the type of person that I may never have had the chance to be if this hadn't happened. So,
yeah, like you said at the very beginning, attitude is so important. And, it's so funny. You watch what's going on in diabetes, and there's constantly a new device. They're putting new bells and whistles on meters, and I'm grateful for all these devices. I'm grateful for my meter. I'm grateful for a CGM. I don't use a pump, but I'm grateful for disposable syringes and all of that. But we're spending so much time and energy and attention on just upgrading devices, while we're not spending any time or attention on helping people emotionally be stronger and more resilient.
Almost upgrading their mentality. Yeah.
I mean, you've got to have a certain amount of strength and resilience to get up and do the things you should be doing to keep yourself well every day, and to look at this from a positive point of view and all of that. And, for some of us, that may be more natural. It may be our nature. For others, it's teachable because they haven't been introduced to this way of thinking. And we would get a lot more out of helping people come, like in my work with Flourishing, and you talked about language, think about it. When you hear about the emotional language of chronic illness, it's always coping. Coping. You have to cope. The word coping is a negative.
Yeah, I agree.
Coping says you're not okay, you're not normal, you're not doing well enough, you're struggling. And
Hmm.
yet that's the word that defines living with chronic illness, coping. And so, in my work I'm saying, I'm coping just fine. A lot of us are already coping. There's so much more, this flourishing. So
Yep.
when you look at language, language is really powerful. When you look at attitude, you can have all the devices in the world, you can know everything, you can have all the nutrition books, you can have read them all, but if you don't have the wherewithal to get up and do the stuff you know and use the devices you have, nothing's going to change.
I
So
couldn't agree more. I
that's
mean,
why building that emotional resilience and strengths, that's what sets me on fire.
yeah, same, and really same here. And I'm so glad to have connected with you in this way, because I mean, really, what you said is very true. One of my favorite quotes is, "Common sense is not always common practice." Although we know what we should be doing with our meter, what we should be doing with our CGM or pump or MDI, we know that we should be doing it, but we're not doing it. So it's not just the knowledge in itself is not as powerful or powerful at all, really, if it's not being put into practice. So that psychology behind it, that's, I mean, really how I work with people. It's, I like to teach people important things, which I find to be important, that, that are, applicable, such as being comfortable with changing, your insulin delivery, whether you're doing it via where I was on injections I just got my Omnipod. I've had it for less than a year now. So for 23 years I was injecting manually, but I find a lot of people come to me with the fear of changing their own insulin delivery, but then I have to ask you a question, which is, do you do the exact same thing every single day? Do you eat the exact same meal at the exact same time every day? Because if you don't, then you have to get comfortable taking the action of, adjusting your bolus or your injection, adjusting that to match what's going to happen. And instead of depending on a doctor to tell you what you should be doing, you can take the doctor's advice under advisement, but only you can decide and find out by checking your blood sugars after you change and being on top of it, taking the action to see if that's working for you. You have to take it into your own hands. And I find many people want to just have this done for you system. Oh, here's exactly what you have to do, follow this regimen, whereas that is just not a viable way to live, to flourish or thrive with diabetes. So it is all action oriented, it is all psychology oriented, and I teach people I always call it stepping into your power, or embracing your inner diabetes dominator, because you have to kind of have, I know a lot of people kind of get turned scared of the word dominator, but the thing is, in a certain sense, you have to be that type of mentality sometimes in order to say, I'm in control of this disease versus this disease being in control of me. That's just kind of how you have to do it, taking those actions and getting comfortable with, yes, this is your disease. Yes, you have to cope with it, but yes, you should also try to understand that thriving or flourishing is just a couple action steps away. It's not that far out of reach.
Yeah. So I'd like to say something about control, because I think there's a misunderstanding often. We talk about controlling it not controlling us. And I like to be a little more subtle, because especially with type 1, I don't believe there's such a thing as control. I think we can influence our health. I think we can do things that give us the best shot, no pun intended, at having the numbers we want. But as for control, I think that's not entirely in our hands, because anyone knows, you can do the same exact things 2 days in a row. Eat the same meal, take the same amount of insulin, get the same amount of exercise, and you will have different results, because there's so many things going on in your body that we can't be privy to. And I think when people get the idea that they can control this, and then as hard as they work at it, they see, well, they can't really 100% control it, I think we should let them off that hook. and not talk about control, but talking about the best we can do to get our best results.
Sure. And I agree with what you said 100%. As, as perfect as I try to be, and I hate the word perfect, but as consistent as I try to be. Perfect is not real. I call perfect the unicorn of life. It's just not real. It's just not attainable. But what I guess maybe what I should have said is that we can control our actions. And our actions are what you said are going to lead into the influence. So, like I said, nobody's going to control what you eat or what time you eat, mostly. Obviously if you're a child and you're in school, that's another story. But if you're an adult, generally you control whether you get up and walk an hour, or you can control whether you have a pizza pie or you don't. So yes, diabetes itself, yes, that's not a controllable thing. So sure, yeah, you could rush up to 300 because you get stressed out about, for me, if I go to go give a speech, which I love to speak, but my blood sugar inevitably rises before I go to give a speech, regardless of what I've eaten. You never know when when there's adrenaline, that adrenaline releases or some cortisol comes out. It's like, you could be straight line all day, and then all of a sudden it's like, whoop. So yeah, you can't control that, but you can control what you do to influence that. So I guess I should have been a little clearer, yes. But I appreciate that, yes. Because I don't want people to think.
Words. I love words. So, and often we speak in sound bites, and, it's the culture we live in. We hear things on TV, control it, yada, yada. So people get, impressions and ideas that aren't necessarily true.
If I could ask you, so I'm sure you have lots of items and actionable tips, but I like to kind of finish up with what you think the top 3 maybe most important or maybe most influential things that people can do to start, taking action or to start deciding they would like to flourish instead of cope. What would be the top 3 things that you would recommend?
Well, I should say, because this is an opportunity I should take advantage of, that my latest book, which is called Diabetes Do's and How-To's, is actually that. It's 65 things we should do to have our best health with diabetes, and it's lots of actionable steps in how to do it, because one of the things I do is speak across the country as a peer mentor. So I'm talking to other people who have diabetes as someone who has it. And it was shocking to me how it didn't matter where I was, whether I was in Michigan or Rhode Island or Washington, wherever I was, there were so many people living with diabetes who really don't know what to do and how to do it to have their best health. I think in part because they don't get enough time with their healthcare providers, and they don't necessarily go looking for more information. So I wrote this book to give them a blueprint. So if anybody wants to know, Diabetes Do's and How-To's, available on Amazon.
Absolutely.
I will give you the 3 things that I feel passionate about that work for me, and God knows there's many, many, many. But these are the ones I thought of when you asked me that question. And, you talked about people who just want to be told the guidelines and they will take a set amount of insulin for any meal, which I don't do and isn't a good strategy. But what I do is I use routine as a tool to help me with my blood sugar. So I do eat fairly much the same things day to day. My breakfast, my lunch, my dinner, day to day, they don't vary very much. And I do eat about the same times of day. And I'm very fortunate. I work at home so that, yes, I can control that, what I eat and when I eat. And doing pretty much the same every day means I know fairly well how much insulin I need to cover that meal. And so while I may not get the same exact results every day, it is a lot better than when I just sort of go off my routine and start living and eating and playing like a normal person, quote unquote, somebody who's not looking at what they're eating, and my blood sugars do this.
Right. So I have a similar thing, like when I go on vacation, it's like, all right, I have to really take a step back here because I know that I'm going to be off my routine. I'm similar to you, where most of my work is done from home, and I do eat very similar meals at very similar times every day. But yeah, but we do have to be very wary when we get off our routine. So yeah, that's excellent.
Yeah. And the second thing I do personally, and maybe this is also for type 1, I follow a fairly low-carb diet. And, you know, some people will say, well, is it really low carb? Because I eat a lot of vegetables, and carbs have vegetables. Even non-starchy green vegetables have carb. And yet we can say, compared to the American diet, I eat a very low-carb diet. I eat protein, I eat healthy fat, and I get a lot of carbs from my vegetables and nuts and seeds and the occasional breakfast bowl of steel-cut oats.
Would you mind putting a number of grams on your low carb?
You know, the funny thing is I don't count grams anymore. I'm so used to, okay, my bowl of oatmeal, I'm going walking, I need 2 units of insulin. I don't even do the gram thing. I skip over that.
Right.
But, you know, I can say my typical breakfast is, as I mentioned, either a half a serving of steel-cut oats, and I fill in with nuts and seeds and yogurt and peanut butter, Greek yogurt, and a spoonful of peanut butter. And if I'm not having that, I might have a protein fruit shake I make in the blender, or I might just have some cottage cheese and fruit with flax seeds. My lunch almost every day is a salad with some grilled chicken and some leftover vegetables from last night and a sprinkling of feta cheese. And my dressing is olive oil. And I use some herbs, whether it's basil or just an herb mix. And my dinner most often is fish or chicken and vegetables. And, you know, most people will look at me like, oh, my God, you're depriving yourself. But I really like these foods. I like these foods. I like eating this way. I like feeling healthy. I like that my blood sugars are more predictable. And I snack on some cheese, nuts, and if I want sweets, dark chocolate, really good, 85% dark chocolate, and chocolate biscotti that I make myself with almond flour.
Nice.
Very low carb.
Thank you for sharing those details. I'm sure many people will appreciate hearing what a meal or a day in the meals of Riva Greenberg are. No, that's real. A lot of people, I mean, honestly, when people come to me, they want to know what I eat. And I log all my food on MyFitnessPal, so I'll give people access. You know, you can friend people on it. I'll give people access to my food diary so they can just look at what I eat, because I similar to you, but yeah, I mean, every morning I start with a shake, protein, and I put peanut butter and spinach and strawberries and, you know, that kind of thing, and salads and proteins, and, you know.
I love it.
Yeah, and I eat a lot of eggs too. I mean, I just yeah, kind of very similar to what you eat.
Yeah.
So, but I enjoy it, but I didn't used to. But that's the thing, is that's a whole other, we won't even get into it too much, but I mean, the way that 80% of what's on supermarket shelves now is actually food stuff, it's actually not actually food. That's the way that we have become accustomed to eating. When people start eating real food, they're, oh, this is weird, but really what's weird is what people eat generally. So it's a transition in itself.
It is. It's very much a transition, and people should realize that your taste buds change.
Oh, yes.
So if you're used to eating junk food and food that's overly salted and heavy with grease and fat and sugar, you're used to it. But, you know, if you go a month without eating that stuff and then you start eating it again, oh, my God, it's so sweet. It's so salty. It's so greasy.
I can attest to that 100%. Oh, I've been there. I've tried to eat foods that I used to think were delicious, and I just, honestly, the taste actually makes me go, ooh, now. Like things like, even like Oreos that are, ugh, like it's just, it's a definite totally different makeup going on in your mouth when you change your internal chemistry. So, absolutely.
Yeah. And my third thing is, and we've talked kind of throughout this conversation about it, is focusing on the positive. Really, you know, our brains are hardwired to look at the problems, and we have to make a conscious attempt to focus on the positive. So when something good happens, really take a moment, pause, appreciate the good thing that happened. Take it in. I mean, I think I just read, really breathe it in and let it sit with you for 30 seconds. There, you know, we know this thing from positive psychology that the more we're engaged with positive emotions, the more open we are to seeing solutions and possibilities, the more creative we are, the more flexible we are. So I really believe that the more we can shift from looking for the problems all the time to looking for what's working and being appreciative for that, the better we do.
Absolutely, and I call that, I teach that as well, and I call it celebrating. We don't take the time to celebrate, and we only think of celebrating when it comes to some giant, you know, it's a birthday, it's an anniversary, but you, in order to kind of get that, what I call an upward spiral of positivity, you want to keep going on it, you get addicted to that feeling of positivity. Every little thing that you do that is positive, you need to take that 30 seconds, that 1 minute, and celebrate. But you actually have to do something physical, like you said, whether it's breathing it in. And I know a lot of people think it's corny, but I mean, if you're alone or whatever, you just turn on your favorite song and jump up and down and celebrate. Say, yes, I did that. Whether your blood sugar is 100, I mean, that might sound silly, but the thing is that your brain, your psychology gets addicted to that feeling of goodness and even so we have this tendency to negate these little things like, oh, well, my blood sugar is just 100 right now, like whatever. But no, that your blood sugar is 100 right now, that's awesome, and you need to celebrate that and get used to feeling that feeling of amazing accomplishment, even because we have this, you know, oh, we only can celebrate these big. No, we celebrate every little accomplishment, and that gets you to the bigger accomplishment. So yes, I agree.
Little stuff is the fabric of our lives.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right? So when we're done, I'm going to jump up and down.
You know,
we've had this moment.
You know what? I'm going to do that too. I'm going to go put on my favorite song. I have a rebounder in my living room, which is like a little mini trampoline, and I jump on it. I know that also sounds silly, but that can just get you do 5 minutes, and I get this thing from, like, you know, Sports Authority or Dick's Sporting Goods. It's like $50. It's not like some crazy piece of workout equipment that you have to spend millions of dollars on. You jump up and down on your rebounder to your favorite song, one song for 3 minutes. I guarantee your whole mood will change.
Well, I would love to do that, but my neighbor would find.
Yeah, I live in a townhouse, so it's a little different. But if I had someone below me, I'd probably be a little more wary of jumping up and down all the time. But yeah, so really, thank you so much. Honestly, as much as the viewers that see this has been wonderful for me as well. So thank you for your time. You've made me very happy. And keep doing what you're doing. What's that?
It's lovely to meet.
Oh, absolutely. So, guys, go out there, go get Riva's book, Diabetes with Do's and How-Tos, because I'm sure it is amazing. I'm actually going to go order it right now. You can check your Amazon. I'm going to go check it out. So, yeah, unleash your diabetes dominator. We're out there. We're doing it. You can do it too. And just go out and believe that you are stronger than you think you are. So thank you, Riva, and we'll see you on the next interview.
Ciao.